Yeah. All right. Hello and welcome to this July 19th, 2021 meeting of the River Falls Utility Advisory Board. Welcome back, everybody. We'll start with the roll call.
Bernie,
Present.
Morset,
Here.
Richter,
Here.
Stafford,
Here.
Toon,
Here.
Wells Mangold,
Here.
West Catawba.
Here.
Here. Good. Thank you. And we're going to move on to approve our June 21st, 2021 meeting minutes. Approve.
I'll motion to approve the meeting minutes of June 21, 2021.
Second. Thank you, guys. So, all those in favor of approval, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Good, moving on. I believe we have a public comment tonight from Patricia. Would you go ahead? State your name for the audience and go ahead.
My name is Patricia LaRue, and I live at 489 Marcella Court. I'm here tonight to comment on the relicensing of the River Falls Hydro project. I know you're probably thinking what possibly can be said that hasn't been said already, but I'd like to talk in a broader sense. I want to go back to the beginning. In January 2013, a notice from the FERC landed on Charlie Bronick's desk. The notice told the River Falls Municipal Utilities that the licensing of their hydro operations was set to expire on August 31st, 2018, and that it was time to start the relicensing process. I understand that this was about the time that Kevin Westhouse was interviewing for his job as a director. Tell me that's not a coincidence.
Right.
It had been 25 years since the last time the hydros were licensed, and nobody quite knew how this worked. The city contacted TRC. Our consultant at the time was Rita. TRC ran the numbers and they gave their presentation. TRC determined that to do a straight relicensing of the community's hydroelectric project would cost in total, on the low end, $218,000, and on the very high end, $444,000. Those figures included TRC's consultations, studies, permitting, and the like. Later, we contacted Kaiser Hydro to do an inspection of our hydro properties. We learned that to update and repair the facilities would cost, at the high end, $250,000. That figure included everything from straightening the Powell Falls shaft to tuck pointing the brick on the powerhouse. All in all, relicensing and updating the hydros would have cost us $700,000 total. We know now that revenues from the hydros from 2013 to 2019, minus the maintenance expenses, would have paid for licensing and updating the costs. The community would have been able to generate renewable energy until 2058. We average about 1.7 million kilowatt hours per year. But as they had the right to do, groups emerged to express their opposition to relicensing and push the city to immediately surrender our license and remove the dams. The local groups involved were Friends of the Kenny, Trout Unlimited, and the Kitty River Land Trust. These groups promised us that there was a spectacular 20-foot hidden waterfall which existed behind the Junction Falls Dam. They told the community that the hydro generation was costing the city money, and they told the community that there were deep pockets on the East Coast who would write us out a check if the community agreed to remove the dams. The city requested an extension from the FERC to give up the groups a chance to discuss. The FERC denied our request, we appealed, and in early March 2016, the FERC approved a 5-year extension. These people had a right to voice their opinion, but they didn't have a right to lie to us. Or as the court would say, they had an uneven relationship with the truth. But to reiterate, the cost to relicense our hydros was to be less than $700,000. Everything spent after that and the time involved is a cost incurred due to those who wanted the dams removed. There's the first comment was that there was a 20-foot hidden falls behind the dam. You've all probably seen the sign, the Friends of the Kenny place in people's yard. You know the one that actually looks like it's Junction Falls Dam, but was used to falsely advertise a beautiful hidden falls that you could see but for the Junction Falls Dam. I have provided you with a picture that was taken sometime between the years 1897 and 1900. We know this because Junction Mill Dam is washed away in 1995 in an 1895 flood, and it moved Eagle Rock. You can see Eagle Rock is moved. The Junction Mill burned in 1897, and you can see the mill is burned. This picture was taken before 1900 when the city erected a 10-foot rock and timber dam. You can see there is no dam. You can also see from this picture there is no 20-foot waterfall. The only waterfall is Junction Falls, which you can see today. I mean, who really believes that in 1900, River Falls would have built a 9 or 10-foot wooden dam in front of a 20-foot waterfall? A presenter from Interfluve came to one of our Kenny Corridor project meetings, and he gave us a presentation. Behind him was this huge poster of this purported waterfall, the one that is seen in so many yards. I asked the guy from Interfluve if his studies supported the height of the falls and the volume of water shown in the picture. His comment was, well, that's just an artist's rendition. I showed him the picture from the 1890s that I'm showing you. I then told him that the picture of the 20-foot falls, as presented behind him, was also provided to the public and attached to his report. His response was, the Friends of the Kenny are my client. The second misrepresentation. The hydros are losing money. Julie Bergstrom, the city's finance director, like forever, confirmed time and time again that the hydros were making money. She termed it as a positive cash flow for the city. How can you legitimately say that the hydros are going to pay for relicensing if you're also saying that hydros aren't making money? There was a recent comment on this social media that, quote, ratepayers will either pay $1 million in maintenance costs to keep the dams or $1 million up to take the dams out. It's all the same to the ratepayers. That comment piqued my interest. So I went over the numbers. You have to go back to the year 2000, 21 years, to accumulate $1 million of maintenance costs on the hydros. What wasn't mentioned by that person, that within that 21 years, you have to go back to expend $1 million in maintenance costs. Revenues from the hydros added up to $2.8 million, and they produced 33 million kilowatt hours of renewable energy. Last year, the hydros generated 1.8 million kilowatts, even with Powell Falls on the sidelines for 3 months. Our new rate, at our new rates, that's almost $200,000 in revenue with renewable energy. But back to the credibility issues. The final one, the one I'm really here to talk about, is that there were these deep pockets out east. In 2017, this advisory board got it right. Your recommendation to the Kenny Corridor project was this: relicense the dams, keep Junction Falls Dam, and remove Powell Falls at some time in the future. At the very next Kenny Corridor project meeting, still in 2017, the representatives from Friends of the Kenny, Kenny River Land Trust, and Trout Unlimited told our group that your recommendation was unacceptable. They told us that in order to get the money, they needed deadlines. With project deadlines, these groups told us they could apply for private funds. Those of us in the committee who wanted to keep renewable energy agreed to put dates on the removal of the dams. If the resolution provided for the creation of new resources, not buying existing resources, but creating new resources of renewable energy to replace the energy lost by the hydro generation, we agreed to give them dates. Buddy Listerl drafted the resolution, which was passed in February 2018 with modifications. Since February 2018, more than 3 years, these private groups have had their dates. They now complain that everything is happening too fast. They haven't had time to make the connections needed to create relationships with these deep pockets. Their complaints are not credible. Not only have they known the FERC study schedule of 2018 to 2020, but if you count up all the studies proposed by these groups, there's over 60. They are proposing studies for which they have no intention to pay for. knowing that the ratepayers will be on the hook for their studies and which will eventually be paid for from revenues created by the hydros. Down the road, they will then point to the hydros' efficient funding and tell the community that the hydros are losing money. Draining our funds is not how a partnership should work. I agree with Scott Simpson when he said, we should not be surprised that we're on the hook for these expenses. We knew when the council decided to go down this road, one day or another, we were going to have to pay for it. The city council knew it was committing the city ratepayers to a $12 million project, which they had no confirmed way to pay for other than taxpayer money and ratepayer money. There are 7,000 ratepayers in River Falls. More than 80% of them are residents. There has been nothing but empty promises. I was relieved to hear that we had been approved for $1 million from the DNR. And I hope that represents our portion of the bargain, but I doubt it will be privately matched. Finally, I have heard, excuse me, I'm running out of breath. I have heard many comments about the Kenny Corridor Collaborative. I have been present at maybe 90% of their meetings. These are extremely hardworking people. 3 of them literally have small children. I think young Scott's child is 2 months old, but they come to these meetings. Michelle does her best juggling the movie theater and the KCC meeting. They have former city attorney Steve Goff doing pro bono work. They have former city planner Tony Steiner writing the grants. KCC strongly suggests that if you're on the board, you make a yearly contribution to the KCC. They have done Facebook, Instagram, GoFundMe pages. They even talked about raffling off the prize to a person to have the right to flip off the switch on the hydros. It's not for lack of trying. The money hasn't come in. Here's my point. You don't need to write a grant to donate to GoFundMe or to make a charitable contribution. You need people who agree with what you're doing and are willing to put some skin in the game. If 1 or 2 companies come up with $5 million to take out the dams, that only proves that rich people are controlling our community's own asset. But if you have 5,000 people who pay $1,000 each, or if all those people who signed the Friends of the Kenny petition, who wrote letters to the board, the council, and to the FERC, threw $2,000 in, that would be significant, even impressive. But what are we hearing? Crickets. I want to thank you all for your time. I appreciate the work you do, not only on the hydros, but on watching after the taxpayers' money. It's what we've come to expect from you, and I don't know that you receive the proper appreciation that you deserve. So thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. You've educated us multiple times. Appreciate it. Can't comment now, but I've learned a lot from you. So, are there any other comments? If you haven't already, sign your names.
Yeah.
You got it? Okay, very good.
Benjamin Fox, 2529 Pole Avenue, which is, yeah, there we go. Recently, several committees of the city along with administration have been looking at future uses of the retired obsolete power plant building that is at the Junction Falls site. I don't know if any of you guys have looked at it since they removed the fences, but it's very clear that the future use of that building shouldn't wait 25 years. I believe that the building should be knocked down and taken out because right now it is full of holes. It has peeling paint on the backside of cinder blocks. And just kind of urban debris is easily accumulated at that site. I know that the city does not have that in the CIP currently, but even when they talk about the representative showing it, what did he show? He showed a very plain block. It's chain link fences there, which is, and it's got rocks, it's got weeds growing up. So the question is there a viable future use of that? Which I do not believe so. And I think that it should be turned down and kept underneath the utility until certain resources are done to rehabilitate it. I think that it shouldn't be put into the city's parks department just because it's unused, but I do believe that it has a very noticeable and highly trafficked area for traffic, and it can easily become an eyesore if it is not properly maintained and such. So I encourage all of you guys to look at it. It's been, now that the fences are down, it's a lot easier to see the site. And that's with that, I believe you. Thank you.
All right, from there, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. Looking at the West Central Wisconsin Biosolids Facility Commission. To acknowledge those minutes. Scott, it says acknowledge, not approve. Approving.
You would be approving the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. On the language. Can I get a motion to approve our consent agenda?
Motion to approve this consent agenda.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of approving consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. With our consent agenda of the biosolids, moving on to reports. We're going to start with the quarterly finance.
I would like to introduce Tracy Biederman, our account manager. She's here for our quarterly report. I saw the preliminaries on this, I'm sure as well as you did. And it's a little more fun this year than it was last year at this time. So, Ms. Biederman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin.
I think Jared's actually running into the room to allow you to come on.
Okay, not a problem. Well, I don't have to be redundant about the financial statements you have in front of you. I believe Lene is going to provide you these PowerPoints or in a PDF format after the meeting. So does anybody have any questions on the current financial memo or the financials that you have in front of you? See, positive results. Nobody has any questions. All right. Everybody can see that screen? Is that my screen or your screen, John?
He's getting you. Hold on. Second. I think we're ready for you, Tracy.
All right. I thought maybe, so everybody can see slide 1 and slide 2 possibly.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, so I'm presenting, but it didn't move forward.
Tracy, I'm presenting this one.
Okay.
So I'm gonna
I'll let
comment.
you, okay. All right, there's a little, I have a little graphical gray box. Does everybody else see that too?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see if I can move that, maybe.
You can see if you can move it.
Getting a little better.
There we go.
So as you can see, in 2021, our revenues are trending upwards for pretty much all of the utilities, the electric, water, wastewater, stormwater. Electric has seen quite a big influx these last couple of months because of high usage. And I believe Kevin had probably mentioned some high demand days that the SCADA system was recording. Then the mid-year expense comparison, obviously, if our revenues are going up, we're gonna have to be purchasing more power. The other ones seem to be pretty stagnant, water, wastewater, and stormwater water over the last 3 years. Next. Next.
There we go.
Okay. All right, here's just a showing of our total AR balances and what balances are still greater than 31 days. So we have to do kudos to the CSR customer service people for their big efforts on collections, because that has gone significantly down compared to January 31st. So as I said, revenues are going up, so we can expect to see the AR balancing increases, especially for the electric company. And then cash balances with those collection efforts are also trending on the upwards. But just keep in mind, it's not a big pot of money that's readily available. It also includes some restricted funds for debt service payments, and then some cash reserves we have for upcoming CIP projects. So we'll be focusing on monitoring the cash, our cash on hand, the reserves, and at what point would we need to go out to loan and bond for future CIP projects. But so far, everything's looking good.
Tracy, this is Kevin on the slides too. At the last meeting, I was talking about the outstanding accounts and the work that our customer service staff was doing. And they're actively calling, sending letters, calling, and getting these outstanding accounts whittled down. And as you can see by the bar graph here, their efforts are paying off.
So yeah, out of the 1.5 million just for electric, obviously the 84,000 is all funds put together, but everything is less than 30 days and just got billed most likely last week when the bills went out on the 6th or the 9th,
So,
or 2 weeks ago probably.
Yeah.
Tracy,
Yeah.
if I could. How many unfortunately have we had to shut off? And how many do we have left as a dollar amount? Or as a connection amount? Do we have left that are not cooperating and not working out a plan? Do we have anybody?
Kevin, you might want to, as far as I know, there was just one person left out, but it's a vacant house. My understanding is there's one person that's still shut off,
Okay.
but there hasn't been any other usage. So we believe, yes, but I can get that information for you as well.
I think there might have been two, Tracy, but one or two. I guess the other good news there is it's not been any higher or any more unusual than other years. So we're trending right in the same.
Correct.
I know every time
Yep.
this comes up with counselors, certain council members who really pay a lot of attention. It's good information. Thank
And
you.
again, I just want to reiterate, and I've said it a million times, but our goal is not to turn people off. That's not our goal at all. Our goal is to work out payment arrangements with everybody and get people directed to financial help or available. That's our goal.
And then when you get to the monthly report for the CSR deck, I believe that gives you more insight as to how many they actually did disconnect and how many letters they sent out. That'd be a lot more informational than what I have at my hands right now. Next. Now I'm just gonna go into electric, water, and sewer as just because stormwater is pretty stagnant year over year. That's just a fee. It's not really based off of consumption or delivery. So as you can see, residential and public authority year over year has significantly saw the huge increase of consumption. And combined, it's 2.9 million in comparison to last year for the 2021 PWH sales. And as I noted, residential and public authority were the greatest contributors. And I just wanted to give you a little 5-year history on how much KWH sales we've done for the 6 months ending June 30th for the last 5 years. So it's kind of been way down, way up, and we're back way up again. And it's pretty much all heat and weather based. Next. So history shows 2019, oops, back one. Back one. So just a 3-year comparison on our financials. I'll keep talking while he figures out how to get to that P&L later. We knew in 2018 that we would need to go in for a tariff review because our expenditures were exceeding our revenues. So in 2019, we started to see that first decline in net income to be a net loss. 2020 was even more significant with our public authorities all shut down, but our expenditures remaining stagnant. In 2021, when there's been a full year of rates implemented, we are showing black dollars on the bottom line. Next. All right, here's the water details. That year over year, we've increased 25.1 million gallons when we compare it to 2020. And the irrigation has been the biggest contributor at 15.9 million gallons in addition to what we did 6 months ago. So there's people wanting their lawns to look gorgeous. And I did another 5-year comparable of the total gallons sold. Kind of goes up, down, and comes back up again. Next. And here's for water for the 6 months ending. You can see as a comparable, our transmission is up, and that's due to the professional services in that bucket. And it would mostly be the timing of water main breaks and the excavation costs coming through. And then the other additional cost this year that we also had in 2019 was the summer help that we hired through Express Personnel. So that's back on board for this year. And then in the admin, you see that bucket's a little bit higher too. And that was due to a reallocation of one of our FTEs where they formerly were 20/80 and 20 was HR and 80% electric. And in 2021 budget, we reallocated that resources to feel that it was a better fit for how the work was being done. So we did 20 HR and 40 water and sewer. Next. And finally, I combined the sewer slide deck. There's really not much more to report on sewer sales because sewer sales is based off of your water meter domestic delivered. And then I know the treatment plant puts together slide decks for their statistics. So as you can see, wastewater has always held its own and they're very strong. But in previous slide decks, you did see their cash was declining and I forgot to mention that their cash has declined because we did not bond for the oxidation ditch. We have been using our operating cash to fund that. And that's one of the main reasons that their cash has declined year over year. That was the last slide deck I have. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free.
I mean, Tracy may have mentioned it, but a lot of these utilities are related to weather, both electricity usage and water. And I think we can say we're in a drought this year. We're pumping a lot more water than we have in the past years.
Yep, the water towers have been working overtime.
But as from a financial position, we're in a very good place for electric, water, and wastewater in 2021. That should be a takeaway from this slide.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Moving on to utility dashboards. Kevin?
He's going to try to turn that on, the feedback kind of so long. One thing I wanted to hit on utility dashboards is we did reach a milestone with electric AMI. We got to over 50% installations on AMI for electric. So we're pretty excited about that. And our calculations are that we should be probably 18 months away from completing all of electric AMI. So we're well on our way. And now we're re-gearing up water. We took a year off last year because of COVID and getting into people's houses. But we'll be ramping that back up. That's going to be a little longer and slower process, but we're in the middle of doing that. One other exciting thing for electric AMI and AMI in general, WPPI Energy houses the AMI data, and they have an outage map already, but we didn't make it outward facing. Because we're over 50%, we're going to put that outage map now on our website. So if there's an outage, people can go to our website and see generally where the outage, how many customers are out, and generally where the outage is at. So, and we're going to speed that process up a little bit because I think Virgil and Brian calculated that if they install about 380 more AMI meters and put one AMI meter on every transformer that's left out there, that if there's an outage, we're going to get a lot better outage reading for the public. So we should be able to do that hopefully in the next 3 or 4 months even, and then go back and finish up the rest of the AMI meters. So, I mean, the outward facing map, the number of customers who are out, and then giving people direction of where to go to learn more about that outage, I think is going to be pretty nice for our customers.
Kevin,
What?
is it out yet?
It's not out yet, but it's going to be out soon.
Kevin,
Yes.
with that outage report, where do you think you can go and see what's out? Is that mobile friendly? You wouldn't be able to pull up your internet on your laptop if your power's
I
on.
believe that's the case, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
serious.
yes. Like social media too, a lot of that, we use that for a lot of our outage information gets pulled up on your phone, so. You should be able to get to our website on your phone and see it there as well, Tom. And other than that, on the dashboards, I don't, Tracy kind of went over the details, so I don't think I need to go over that again, but, nobody likes to see a drought in the heat, but for utilities, we're in the sales business, so electricity, water, and sewer, and that bodes well for our utility. And sewer, you see the revenues in sewer, and that's there for a reason. We have some big projects coming up with the North Interceptor. For water, we've got some big projects coming up with both the North Water Tower and then the North Looping project as well. So we have money to spend, so we're definitely not taking in too much money. So we look at it that way. So the rates are where they need to be to collect the money to do the major infrastructure projects that need to be done.
Question,
Yeah, go ahead.
Page 28, Kevin, you talked about electronic bill payments. There's been some issues with electronic bill payments on current accepted utility account numbers, 165% out.
Yes, that was, when we went over to my account, there were some transition issues for a few customers. That one of the last, there's like a 7-digit code number, whatever. One of the last or first digits, I can't remember which one it was, didn't get transposed over in some cases, and that was what was causing the issue. So then our customer service staff had to work manually with those customers and get it straightened out. So it was a transition issue from one system to the other and not quite reading those account numbers perfectly.
Thanks. I was just curious about that.
Yeah, it was like might have had a 0 and one was using the 0, then the new system wasn't using the 0 or something, was something along those lines, and how the computer program read those numbers. Some small inconsistency. And it wasn't for a widespread number of people, but it hit you.
Any other questions? Moving on. We have a report on what's going on with FERC, the Hydroelectric Relicensing update.
Yes, we have Leslie Brodkowski, our consultant here, who's been working on FERC. And before I introduce her, I'm going to bring this picture up right here. I think I did show Leslie this today, and I did tell her I was going to introduce her with this picture. So this was a year difference. So a year on July 4th, there was Lake Louise. It was just after the flood, and then we got the drawdown order from FERC. And there it is on 7/3/2021, and you can see the difference of Lake Louise from in 1 year's time span. It's really draining up around there. the river has taken shape. And it's quite a contrast in 1 year. And Leslie Brodkowski has really worked hard behind the scenes, her organization, on our FERC hydro relicensing. And then also, we just submitted our amendment to our original FERC license to remove Powell Falls and then have that turned over to the DNR for the removal. So Leslie, without further ado, if you're on, I'll let you take it away. I see
Thanks. Thanks,
our IT
Kevin.
engineers running into the back room, maybe to allow you to do that. So,
Yeah. John, am I able to share my screen, or do you have the presentation to
there
bring
we
up?
go. We have your presentation as well. I'm bringing it up for you.
Okay, sounds great.
Thanks, Leslie. How are you tonight?
Doing well.
Good.
How are you guys doing?
We're good. We're good.
All right, well,
Okay,
thank you for
presentation's
having
up.
me again to talk about the River Falls Hydroelectric project. You guys have been troopers. It's a long process, so thanks for hanging with the process, and we're here tonight to give you yet another update. If you could do the next slide, please. Real brief agenda is to go over first the Powell Falls update, Junction Falls, and then questions and discussions at the end. Next slide. So for Powell Falls, you guys were all there, like Kevin said, about a year ago. The flood came through in 2020 and caused damage to the project, and that caused us to change the FERC process. If you'll remember, we're on the relicensing track for the Junction Falls project, and we were working on decommissioning and removal of Powell Falls through that same process, but the flood caused us to change gear a little bit last year. So in October of 2020, we did get an FERC approved an order for the drawdown, and that required a refill plan by April of 2021 in order to be in compliance with our license. In October of 2020 is when we did do that drawdown for the dam safety inspection, which was completed in the same month. And then in December of last year, we submitted a dam safety and inspection repair report, and also included some options for what we should do with the project. Should we refill it? Should we fix it? Should we leave it drawn down? So that was all included in that December 2020 FERC filing. And then you'll recall last winter in 2021, January and March, we had a couple meetings with the Utility Advisory Board and the Common Council to really talk through what our options are, what are our paths, given what the original plan was and what happened with the flood and the damage to the facilities. And in March of 21, a resolution was passed by the city to select option 3, which is outlined below, is to keep the Powell Falls impoundment drawn down in the current state, but to fix the sluice gate and to pull the turbine. Next slide, please. And breaking option 3 down a little bit further, go back one. Oh, but one more. There you go. So kind of defining that further was to keep Lake Louise drawn down, but fix the gate, that opening that's leading into the powerhouse where the water is currently flowing out of. Remove the turbine to even open up a bigger opening to enhance flow capacity through the powerhouse, so we don't have water filling up in Lake Louise again and bouncing up and down. The second was to initiate sediment removal downstream of the dam after removal of the project from the FERC process, and when we got approvals from state and federal agencies for work in the waterway. Those agencies being Wisconsin DNR and the Army Corps of Engineers. C, as outlined above, is to remove Powell Falls from the FERC license and decommission the project. And in our case, decommissioning included turbine removal and decommissioning of the powerhouse, basically meaning cutting off the power, securing it, making sure everything's kind of tucked in tight, but no longer able to generate power. And we did specifically exclude dam removal through the FERC process. D is to apply under state jurisdiction to remove the Powell Falls Dam after FERC removed Powell Falls from the FERC license. And the last bullet is to have site restoration expected to be complete by 2026. Next slide, please. So all of this was done through a FERC amendment application. And one of the bullets I had earlier, when FERC gave us the order, the approval to do the drawdown in 2020, they said you need to file a refill plan in order to be in compliance with our license. So the FERC license requires there to be run-of-river operation, for the impoundment to be filled, for power to be generating essentially. And since that decision was made by the city to not refill Lake Louise and continue generation, we then needed to move to submit an amendment application to FERC to ask them to amend our current license, which would allow us to keep the impoundment drawn down and no longer generate power at the project. So in that amendment application, we've included the decommissioning and removal of Powell Falls from the FERC license, because again, remember the FERC license does still contain the two projects, so we're not getting rid of the license entirely, just taking Powell Falls out of the license. Then we asked to do some hydraulic capacity improvements, again, trying to get more water through the powerhouse, disconnect that power, pulling out the turbine, stating that we're cleaning our trash racks regularly, and also doing some improvements to the gate to allow the operators to open and close it when they need to help manage water flow through that area. And the last thing that's in there is to stabilize that right embankment using sandbags to cover the exposed areas of the abutment. Next slide, please. For schedule for Powell Falls, the lake bed has been seeded. That photo Kevin kicked us off with is showing some nice green plant growth in the former lake bed. So part of that is volunteer vegetation, part of it's the seed that was put out there by the city this spring. The draft amendment application was pulled together and distributed to agencies and stakeholders in May of this year. And we did send it out for a 30-day comment and review period, and received comments from both the Wisconsin DNR and the State Historic Preservation Organization. And our final amendment application was filed with FERC just recently on July 9th. And in the application, we're requesting that FERC approves the improvements by September 21st. So they could either they can do it on whatever time they want, but we are asking that they approve some of those, that we can get some of the work done yet this year before the ground freezes. So we'll see if they can get some of those improvements approved, and or the entire application would be great, just to approve the surrender from the FERC license. So we'll see how that timeline plays out with FERC as they're reviewing it. The DNR and core permit applications for the access road construction and also sediment management would be applied for after we get the amendment for FERC approval. Next slide. I think that was my last one on, yep, that was my last one on Powell Falls. So before I go forward on Junction Falls, does anybody have any questions on Powell, or do you want me to hold till the end for questions, Kevin?
If there's questions, I would encourage people to ask Nancy.
Maybe this might be a question for Eric. Is Eric's doing our work? Here's the question.
Ayers is doing some of the subcontract work for Leslie.
Okay. Do we have a feel, Leslie, for how much dewatering has happened as a percentage of what's there? I don't know if my question makes sense, but of the sediment that's there, that's now had some vegetation grow on it, how much more dewatering do we think needs to be done there, or what percentages of moisture is left in there that will give us continued?
I haven't been walking on site, so Kevin might be able to better answer that question than I have. But I mean, the flow is through the channel, as you know, but exactly how wet or dry that the former lake bed is. Kevin, can you address that?
Ayers has given some numbers on how much sediment has continued to leave that area. Leslie, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but since that vegetation has come on there, I would guess that's starting to hold the soil in place, the thicker the vegetation gets. Is that a pretty okay assumption, Leslie?
Yeah, so as you were mentioning during your utility report, it's been a pretty dry year, which given where we're at with the Powell Falls project, I mean, you couldn't, I don't even know if I want to say it, I don't want to jinx things, but so far you couldn't have asked for, a more perfect scenario for us. It's really allowing the sediments in the lake bed to get some vegetation, get that root growing. It's helping to secure the soil. I mean, right along the banks of the channel, that certainly is still pretty steep, and there's water flowing through there and not vegetation. So that's still, pretty open to the elements and, could continue to move downstream. But again, as of right now, knock on wood, you haven't had any, real big storms go through that's helping to push that or fill up the impoundment. One of the reasons why we're asking for the flow capacity improvements, enhancements, is to try to minimize bounce in the lake. So if we get a really heavy rain event, it would be possible that it would overwhelm the gate that you do have, the opening, and the water will back up. And anytime you have that water level going up and down, that increases chances for sediment moving downstream. But the more you have vegetation helping to stabilize that, the better.
And anecdotally, if any of you have talked to kayakers, the story I would get every time someone says they have kayaked, I ask them, how is the water clarity? And they all say the water is very clear, but the bottom may be a little murky in spots. So that means that you can see to the bottom, but the bottom's a little greasy in spots. That's the report I'm getting from the 10 kayakers I've asked.
And that's downstream of Powell, Kevin?
Yeah, that report is from, that I gave just now, it's from downstream of Powell.
So I have a question.
I was just gonna say one thing about, so the bounce, we've only had, so we've been down for a year on this lake. There was one time that lake bounced off, and that was about 3 weeks after the initial drawdown. We had a rain event last fall and it bounced up, and since then, that lake has not bounced one time. I'm sorry.
So I think most of you remember my concerns, and that is just being responsible if we do get a major bounce. Not very far to the east of us, some of the areas have experienced a 4 and 5 inch rain event or more. So we've been lucky. So my question is, and it maybe can't be answered, but do we know how big? So we have to wait for the amendment to get signed before we can remove the gate and remove the hydro.
We're hoping we're gonna get approval to do that prior to the amendment being signed, that they will give us an initial go ahead and start some of these activities prior to FERC having it all the way signed. That's what we're hoping.
Great, that's good news. Has our consultant suggested a certain rain event that with those two, with the main gate open and with the hydro out, how big of an event we could handle?
I have not heard that estimate, but I do know we had this spring 1 2-inch rain event over 24 hours and did handle that.
Okay.
So we had one rain event with 1 1/4 inches in about 8 hours. And that river was full to the top, but did not bounce. And then we had a 2-inch rain over 24 hours, and we did not bounce in the current situation. So I think I've heard we can double the flow. So if you extrapolate that out to a 4 or 5 inch rain.
Thank you.
That was
So I have-
I guess, by the way. I just wanted to go on record there.
So I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Can hear you.
Yeah, what happens when the dam is removed? What will that area look like when the dam is gone? Will that be a cascade? Will that still be some sort of falls? Will it down cut deeply, incise deeply, or what will it look like?
So.
Yeah.
I can talk to that, Leslie. Listen, you can add on if I'm correct. So Robert, the river level is at the bottom of the dam, and when the dam is removed, the river level will stay just where it is now, and there will be no cascade there.
Okay, thanks.
I know we're having sound issues, but we'll go through this well. Are there any other questions for Leslie?
Okay, well, I'll keep moving on with Junction Falls, and if you think of more questions on Powell, we can circle back to it. That's fine. I just thought before we kept talking about the other project, we'd just circle back on if there were any questions. So with Junction Falls. So this project, as you all recall, is going through FERC relicensing. So our application to FERC for this project is to get a new license to continue hydropower generation at Junction Falls. So again, when I thank you all for hanging with us so long, back in August of 2018 is when we first kicked off the FERC process. And obviously, even many years before that, we've been talking about the project, but the FERC process really started back in 2018 when we filed the notice of intent and the pre-application document with FERC to relicense the Junction Falls project. Since that time, we've had lots of consultation with agencies and stakeholders and study requests, study implementation. Last year was our first study year. This was our second study year. We've had draft and updated reports and meetings all the way through. So you guys have gotten updates on those details, as have the agencies and stakeholders that are working with us through the process. So as you can see, we've made it almost to the end. So we're doing great of the pre-filing milestones. So the draft license application was but distributed to agencies and stakeholders for their review and comment period back in April of this year. And we did receive comments on the draft license application in July, and we're due to file our final license application at the end of August this year. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the draft license application is the most recent big deliverable that we had on the project. So April 2nd is when we sent that out. And basically the main components of that document, it included a project description, an environmental report, which includes all your different resource areas. Essentially, that would be in a NEPA type analysis, an environmental assessment that FERC will need to do for the project. We had our engineer put together the general design drawings and supporting design report for the dam, and also the project boundary map are really high level components of what went into the draft license application. Comments were received from FERC staff, National Park Service, River Alliance of Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin DNR. And in general, again, there were, comments all over the board, but in general, they were requesting some clarifications on the application, maybe a few corrections, just double checking to make sure everything lined up. FERC staff was looking for a potential revision to the project boundary. A few of the comments addressed commitment for protection, mitigation, and enhancement measures. If you hear us talking about PM&Es, that's what that's referring to. So basically looking forward, what is the city offering to do to help to make this project better, do some enhancements, possible mitigation to offset negative effects of the project. And right now the project team is in the process of reviewing and addressing those comments. And those will all be addressed and wrapped into our final license application that will be filed with FERC on or before August 31st of this year. Next slide. So we're in the home stretch, but there's still a couple more years yet to go. So the FERC process for licensing is broken into pre and post filing milestones. So that last table that I showed you had pretty much all the steps, the major steps anyway, for the pre-filing milestone. So filing the final license application is really the last step of the pre-filing milestones, and then everything after that falls under post-filing. So once we do file that license application, we'll issue a notice in the public newspaper, and then FERC will start looking at the document. If there's any holes or questions, that FERC could file additional information requests if they need more detail about any sections in particular. When FERC staff feel they have all the information that they need to do their environmental assessment, their environmental analysis, they will formally submit a notice that's called the Ready for Environmental Analysis. And then again, there will be another opportunity for agencies and stakeholders to have and provide comments. We'll work with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources on our application for water quality certification. That's a state-specific certification. FERC cannot issue a license without us requesting a 401 water quality certification from the state of Wisconsin. So we'll be working on that in the winter of 22. FERC will do their NEPA analysis, basically taking the information that we've pulled together through the licensing process and our studies to issue. Sometimes they'll do a draft, sometimes they'll go straight to the final, but a draft and or final environmental assessment or environmental impact statement if their analysis shows there's a negative impact. And again, some of the dates on here aren't as prescribed as the licensing part of it, but target range for that would be between 22 and 23. And then we'd expect to get our 401 water quality certification from the DNR in winter of 2023 and a FERC license for the project by summer of 23. Next slide, I think, yep, that was my last one on Junction Falls. So again, pretty high level on the process. We've talked before about studies and some of the other details, but right now we're in the process. We've pulled it all together and are soon to send it all up to FERC for their part of the evaluation. Does anybody have any questions or items they'd like to discuss on Junction or Powell?
Yep, before.
Sorry to back up. On Powell, I did want to ask a question. Does the city or does FERC require how to clear a major beaver dam? If we, let's say we have a major rain event and we get a log jam in front of both gates, did FERC require a plan?
Leslie, I don't know the answer to that.
Nope, there's no plan required. Essentially, the steps that FERC required were outlined, I guess, in the PowerPoint slides. They granted approval for the drawdown for the dam safety inspection. And they said, hey, go do your inspection, make sure it's safe, and then fill it up. Give us a plan to fill it back up by April 1st, unless you tell us otherwise. So our amendment application to them was us basically telling FERC otherwise, that we didn't want to fix the dam and refill it, but we wanted to decommission and remove it. But through that, FERC dam safety or others haven't required a specific, plan for the scenario that you outlined.
Well, we've already gotten that issue with all the stuff in front of the trash can. So, but my understanding is, as soon as we touch one stick, it's ours.
Something like that.
So, Leslie, I mean, we've gone back and forth over some of the what ifs. Even that there's not a specific plan. What I think Mark is asking is, who's going to run and fix it? I mean, what's the reality to that? I think is what we're trying to get to.
Sure, and I'm trying to hear everything. I think I'm hearing most of it, but it's a little hard to hear all of the discussion in the chambers. But essentially, with FERC projects, whether it's in a drawn down state or operating, all projects have operators that are trained to run and operate the project and use their best judgment to stay within their license conditions. So a similar situation would happen here where you guys have some great talented folks out there operating the project, keeping an eye on things and making sure that we're keeping both projects running in the best way that they can based on what's facing them in those scenarios.
In other words, we can deal with it according to the best judgment of the staff here, and that's okay. So, very good. That answer the question, at least?
Yeah, I think I talked about this before. My concern is the heavy timber stuff that would get lodged and not really access from either side. Yeah, I don't want to cast a negative light on it, but I think it's important to be prepared. We've lucked out so far. That's all I'm saying.
And at the beginning of the drawdown, there was some larger debris in front of that opening, and we were able to clear it, but I will say it wasn't easy. To your point, it's not easy access.
Right, and I do think most of that larger, at least visually, with where things are now, most of that larger debris has already been washed down. But again, if the channel moves, it could dislodge something else. So yeah, it is something that the operators will need to keep an eye on.
Kevin, with all of the uncertainty related to COVID and how it's impacting prices and inflation and all sorts of other things, do we know And obviously, this isn't part of this presentation, but do we know if the cost for removal is still about the same, or has that potentially gone up, or are we too far out from that to really determine that yet?
I will say this, when Brent Johnson and I did the memo for you and council here about 3 months ago, when we were estimating costs, we were continually rounding up in anticipation of higher costs. So our range now is from 2.9 million to, I think, 3.3 million for total cost of this total project from beginning till end. So, Callan, we have been rounding up on total cost, to your point, for those same concerns and same reasons.
Very excited to hear. And then related to that, just so it's part of the minutes, do we know how much money has been contributed by the Kinney Corridor Collaborative towards this project?
The Kinney Corridor Collaborative went in conjunction with TU to get $5,000 to pay a lobbyist to help with the DNR state funding.
So nothing towards this project specifically that is relevant to like what we need.
Correct.
Great, thanks.
Just one housekeeping item too, as you see here, Kleinschmidt. So Leslie moved organizations from TRC and Kleinschmidt, but TRC and Kleinschmidt were gracious enough to let Leslie continue to work on this project. And we're still being billed by TRC, and they're not upcharging anything. So directly, Leslie's still working directly on this project through TRC, even though she's employed by Kleinschmidt now. So very nice of those two organizations, and very nice of Leslie to keep on the project. We're glad to have her.
Any further questions? Leslie, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody, for your time.
Thank you, Leslie. Kim and I noticed that a couple of the monthly report items got touched on and therefore skipped it. I don't want to assume that's okay. So are there any pieces of that report you'd like to share yet?
Just a couple of things I'll mention. One is we have postponed the hydrant flushing. It's nice not to have the feedback. I was feeling like Lou Gehrig. We have postponed hydrant flushing for now because of the drought. I think it's bad optics. If you're asking people to conserve water and you're flushing 1 million gallons of water down the sewer, so the storm surge. So we postponed that probably until October. So that's one thing that I thought I'd bring up as far as monthly reports go. And then two, our civilian army, Mark Spafford, sees lights out, a string of street lights out, and he calls that in, and we found out today that we did have a short in some wires. So again, we always encourage our citizens, if you have issues, call in, text in, let us know, email, because we do pass those things along. We do investigate them right away. And to Mark's point, we found a whole series of streetlights that were out due to Mark calling in. So it happens, quite regularly, but I just want to encourage people to do that. So those are just some things of note that maybe weren't directly in the report, but just again, we're pumping a lot of water, sometimes more than 1 million gallons more a day than we were a year ago. One of the observations we have is most new homes now do have an irrigation system in them. That's probably a little bit of a turn of something you would have even seen 10 years ago. So, and people are irrigating, and that's showing up in the water usage.
Kevin, kind of on that same light, I think I saw in the report someplace about a staff person being utilized for watering trees. I assume that's replacement trees for some.
Those are new young trees, and making sure that these boulevard trees will stay alive. So those are trees in city right away. We maybe cut down some ash trees because of the ash borer, replaced with new trees, and then we were taking a little bit of an active role of making sure those new trees got some water so they got started.
Yeah, I guess I was curious is that the plan that the city takes, that the city's going to take care of those, or is there any indicator, has there been any communication to the homeowners that they should because I don't want to see those trees die.
Right.
And, you know, it's pretty dry.
So our new city forester, Mike Noreen, has been communicating with the customers to tell them those trees are their responsibility.
Okay.
But in the meantime, we're just helping nurse them along a little bit to get them going and to show the customers that they need water. So, but our long range plan isn't to water and maintain those forever. We've communicated with the customers that their expectation would be that they maintain and take care of those trees.
Okay. Because I'm not sure my neighbors are taking care of them.
We can't get everyone, but I know they were trying for a while there in those.
Well, as long, yeah, right, as long as there's been some communication that it's, hasn't just been silence, that
Right.
assumption that the city's taking care of, an assumption that the homeowner's taking care of, and nobody's done it, so.
Mike Noreen, city forester, he did realize that the conversations he'd be having around trees with customers, trees coming out, trees going in, people get pretty passionate about their trees adjacent to their house, and he's done a nice job communicating with that, and not always fun either.
Similar to the winter program where we ask people to pay attention and shovel out the fire hydrants.
Yeah.
If a big red truck shows up in the middle of winter and has to shovel out a fire hydrant, it's that much longer before the fire gets out.
I was actually gonna ask about Mike Green and the forestry deal. Has that been long?
That 6 months ago, Scott?
It's been a while.
And Nate Cruz took a job somewhere else.
Yeah, okay.
So Mike is doing 50% forestry and 50% energy services. And that also reminds me, I have a note written down right here. I was going to mention related to the monthly reports is so the green energy blocks, because they went from the $3 to the $2, we're up over 13% participation right now. So we've had I think it was around 40 or 50 new signups in the last just couple of weeks for the green energy blocks. Went from $3 to $2. So we're gonna start creeping up on being the #1 in the country. We're #2 right now. So that's off to our community. I mean, this is a volunteer thing, right? And we got more signups. Another one was late today, so keep knocking it out of the park on green energy blocks. That's a Mike Noreen deal. That's why I brought that up and reminded me. And it's also a customer service deal. We're asking every new customer that signs up for service, we do the ask at the end, would you be interested in your energy block, and we give the explanation, and over half the time they say, yes, sign me up. So the power of the ask, they call that.
Thanks with that.
Yes.
There's a reason McDonald's answer.
Right. That's all I have, Patrick.
Very good. Any questions?
Patrick, I have one thing I should have brought up at public comment. And
Let's just leave it.
I know our viewership is huge, so this would be a good reason to get it out there. I failed to mention during public comment that the mayor has invigorated the mayor cookout this summer. So every district, there's 4 districts in town. Every district will have a mayor cookout this summer. The first one is District 1, which will be held on Thursday night, this coming Thursday night, the 22nd, from 6 to 7:30. It's in Highview Meadows Park. And then District 2 and District 3 and District 4 will be later this summer for that. But this is a great opportunity for citizens to come out, talk about not only issues that they have in their district or in their neighborhood or in their street or backyard, wherever, but across the city. And citizens are more than welcome to attend each and every one of the cookouts, but the mayor has always tried to focus them in a park or in each of the districts. I believe District 2 is going to be Wells Park or Larson Park. I can't remember which. District 3 will be down by the White Pathway parking lot, and District 4 will be at Glen Park. So District 2 is the one I'm not sure about, but there'll be more information. So please, it's always good to see citizens. It's always good to hear them, hear their concerns or hear their praises as well. And sometimes coming in front of the council is intimidating to people. We realize that. So it's always helpful for people to come face to face.
All right, folks, I believe it's time to adjourn. Can I get a motion to do so?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. It's nice to have you back.
I should have said it's always intimidating to come in front of the council unless you're Patricia LaRue.
Didn't you tell I was losing my breath?
Breathe. No, no.